Hey everybody, welcome to Cheeseology with Adam. This is the beginning of a 4-part series on bloomy rind cheeses. In this video, we're going to be making a brie, then we're going to make a camembert in the next video. The third video will be a blue brie, which is a cross between blue cheese and brie, as you can imagine. And then the fourth bloomy rind cheese we'll make to wrap up this series is a triple creme. It's basically a brie taken to the next level. I'm really excited about this series. Bloomy rind cheeses are a relatively short aging period. It's not months and months and months. So it's a cheese you can make and eat within a few weeks, 3 to 5 weeks, somewhere around there. But we'll get to all that in each video. So again, this is the first video of a 4-part series, and I hope you enjoy it. Today we're going to be making a brie. So I'm going to be using raw cow's milk that I bought locally, and I have a list of ingredients that I'll go over here in a moment, but you can also see all the ingredients in the description of this video. Please like and subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, really appreciate that. We'll go over the equipment first, and then we'll look at the ingredients, and then we'll get started. So, a few things we're going to need for this cheese, for this brie. We're going to need a small set of measuring spoons. When I say small, this set goes down to 1/64 of a teaspoon. We're going to need a thermometer, a little bit of cheesecloth. This cheese doesn't actually get drained like we do with other trait cheeses. I'm just using this to drape over the forms, but I'll show you that a little bit later, just to keep dust off of it, things like that. I have 4-inch Brie Forms here. I have 2 of these, and then I also have an 8-inch form that I'm going to use as well. If I just try to put these 2 gallons of raw cow's milk into these 2, it's not going to fit. I would need about 4 of these actually. So I'm going to see what it comes out to be with just using 2, and then a larger one should work out well. Going to need our stir as we always have. Going to need a curd knife as we normally have, and then I have a couple bamboo draining mats. And then for this cheese, I have a couple of these plastic screen draining mat type things. What we're gonna do a little bit later, once we have our curd formed and cut, we're gonna put this form on top of the plastic draining part, and then we're gonna put the mat underneath. This will help it, this will allow it to drain, but still stay off the flat surface a little bit. So we'll go over that a little bit later once we actually get to that point in the process. I'm using a tub here that I've drilled holes in. You can do this a variety of different ways. What we're going to do with this is once the forms are filled with cheese, I'm going to set the forms into this tub and kind of prop it up a little bit. And then off the edge of my table, I'm just going to let it run into my sink. If you have a sink that has a recessed side to it in your kitchen, you can do that there, or you can achieve this pretty easy. Really, you just want the whey to be able to drain from the curd over a long period of time. We're going to flip this many times over about the next day. We don't press this at all, and we don't even cook the curds, which if you see my other videos, cooking the curd it dries them out. We don't do any of that. So we're gonna acidify the milk, and then we're going to put our rennet in, and then we're going to, once the curd is formed, we're going to cut it. The only reason I'm cutting it is because I'm putting it in the small forms, so I'll probably cut it into like 1-inch chunks, very big, but I'm not going to even really stir it. I'm just going to scoop it out. I'll show you that here shortly. For ingredients, we're going to need animal rennet. At least that's what I use. There are other types of rennet, but I use animal rennet. They're on the left. And then we will need C101 Culture. And then on the right, we have our 2 mold powders. One is Penicillium Candidum, and the other one is Geotrichum Candidum. But we're going to start with getting our milk in the pot. What's unique about this cheese is, in addition to milk, we're going to be using 8 ounces of heavy whipping cream. Heavy whipping cream contains about 35 to 40% butter fat. We want this brie to have more fat in it. We're going to remove 8 ounces of this milk. So overall, we're still going to have 2 gallons. It's just 8 ounces of that is replaced by the heavy whipping cream. So we'll get started. Okay, now we're going to dump our raw milk into our pot. gonna put I've already taken 8 ounces of milk out of the other jug. As I mentioned, we'll replace it with 8 ounces of heavy whipping cream to increase that butter, fat, milk content. Okay, I'm gonna measure out 1 cup or 8 fluid ounces of the heavy whipping cream. Dump that in. Now we're just gonna clip our thermometer on the side, and then I put the lid on just enough that I can cover most of the pot. And now we're gonna heat this up. As I've mentioned in other videos, especially for this cheese, we wanna make sure everything is sanitized. We're gonna sanitize my pot, any utensils that are gonna be touching the milk, and definitely the molds that the curd is going to go into in a little bit. I just use food grade sanitizer in a spray bottle. Once the equipment's clean, I just give it a shot, whatever is going to be touching the milk, just to make sure that everything's sanitized. Now that we've got our milk and the heavy whipping cream in our pot, we're going to heat this to 90 degrees. Once we hit 90 degrees, I'll take it off the heat so it doesn't keep heating on this electric hot pad I'm using. And then we'll add our culture and then also the mold powders. Okay, we are now at 90 degrees. As you can see, now what we're going to do is I'm going to take this pot off of the seed source so it does not keep heating up. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to add our culture and we're going to add our mold powders. For this culture, as I mentioned in the ingredient list, I'm using MM100. Everything I'm about to put in here can be purchased via the link in the description. So for the MM100, because I'm using raw cow's milk, it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. If using pasteurized cow's milk, I'm using raw cow's milk, so I need to use about 25% less, maybe 30% less. So I'm gonna measure out 1/8 and then 1/16. That'll get me at about 25% less than the initial amount of a 1/4 teaspoon. So for raw cow's milk, I'm putting in 1/16 plus 1/8 of a teaspoon of MM100 culture. Very small amount. Now I'm gonna just sprinkle this on top. And now I need also 1/8. There we go. Just sprinkle that on top as well. Just use a touch more. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to add the Penicillium Candidum, 1/16 of a teaspoon. Just sprinkle it over the top as much as evenly as I can. You can see it bunched up a little bit there. We're gonna let this rehydrate for about 2 minutes or so before we actually start stirring it in, just to make sure we don't get clumps in it when we start stirring. So you want to let it rehydrate a little bit, and then you can stir. So I'm going to use 1/32 of a teaspoon of Geotrichum Candidum as the second mold powder. Very small teaspoons. That's 1/32 of a teaspoon right there. As you can see, I'm just going to try to sprinkle that on top. Okay, we have our culture in, we have our mold powders in. I'm gonna give that a few minutes to rehydrate, and then I'm gonna show you how to mix that up, and then we're gonna let that set and acidify. I've let the culture and the mold powders rehydrate a little bit. I'm gonna slowly stir this up. I'm gonna stir this for a minute or so, maybe a couple minutes, just slowly back and forth. I'm gonna make sure it's mixed in well. So after we get this mixed in, what we're gonna do is you wanna put a lid on this and wrap a towel around it or something like that to try to keep the temperature, try to keep the milk at the 90 degrees or close to it. And we're gonna let this sit for 60 minutes so the culture can start doing its work. And that is acidifying the milk. So we're gonna ripen the milk over the next 60 minutes, and then we'll come back and add our rennet. Okay, our milk has now been sitting for 60 minutes with the culture and the mold powders stirred in real well. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to add our rennet. So we wanna add 1/4 teaspoon of single strength animal rennet. And I dilute this in about 1/4 cup of cool, non-chlorinated water just helps it disperse more evenly to make sure that it's worked into the milk well. So I'm just gonna give that a little stir in my beaker here. Now I'm gonna pour this in. Okay, we just wanna pour this in our milk. Oh, you can see the top layer. See how that's a little bit different of a color? You can see now when I stirred that in, there's a little bit of yellow on top. That's our butter fat. That's perfectly fine. So now that our rennet is in, we just wanna keep stirring it like this a little bit, back and forth, up and down. Don't wanna be splashing it around. You wanna stir this for about a minute. And then we're gonna put our lid on it, wrap our towel back around it, and we're gonna let it set for 90 minutes. So we have a little bit of an extended setting time for this curd. Okay, put my lid back on, and we will come back in 90 minutes. All right, now that we've got our rennet mixed in to our milk real well, now we're gonna wait 90 minutes, and we're gonna come back, and then we're gonna test to see if the curd is ready to be cut, and then we will cut the curd. What's different about this cheese is, once we cut the curd, we're not gonna do any mixing like we would on other cheeses, cooking the curd. We're not doing that because we wanna retain that moisture in that curd. So we're just basically gonna cut it, and the only reason I'm cutting it is because I'm putting it in two of these smaller forms, these 4-inch forms, just so it kind of sits in there a little bit better. So we'll come back in 90 minutes. It should be fine, but we'll test it to see if we have a clean break. If we do, we'll cut it into 1-inch size squares roughly, and then we'll start scooping it out into our forms. Now what you want to do during this time is you want to make sure obviously all your forms are washed and then also sanitized. So it's a good time to do that. Again, I'm using 2 4-inch forms and then an 8-inch form for 2 gallons of milk. So it'll give me, I think that'll spread out well. Give me about an 8-inch diameter Brie, it's probably about 1 inch thick, and then maybe a little bit thicker in these as well. But yeah, we'll get everything sanitized. We'll come back in 90 minutes, check on our curd, and then we'll go from there. Okay, it's now been 90 minutes. Our rennet has been coagulating the milk, forming our curd over the last 90 minutes. Now what we're gonna do is test for a clean break. I'll show you what that looks like, and if we have that, we will cut the curd in 1-inch size squares, and then we will transfer to molds. This cheese is a little bit easier than some of the other ones, where we have to cook the curd sometimes for an hour or more, stirring constantly or intermittent. This, we're just gonna cut the curd, transfer it, and drain it. So let's check that out. So now what we'll do is test for a clean break. We'll make a small slit this way, and I can feel just cutting into it that we're gonna have good curd. So I make a slice that way, and then a slice right across that, and then lift up a little bit. Look how that separates. That is called a clean break. That's perfect. It's exactly what we want. So now what we'll do is we'll make our 1-inch cuts. Oh, this is really nice firm curd. This worked out really well, I think. I can feel the resistance when I'm cutting. That's great. The reason I'm leaving these so big is usually we cut curd to release whey. We're not necessarily needing to do that. If we were actually using bigger forms, we could just leave it the way it is. But since we do have some smaller forms, we will cut the curd, and then now we're going to transfer it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my forms so I have all 3 in this draining pan. So this is just a 6-inch high tub that I drilled holes around the outside. I have it sitting on the lid of it where I drilled a couple holes there. So what I'll do is I'll have this sitting on top of the lid. I'll put something under it so the pan is tilted. It'll drain into the lid and then drain right into the sink. I think that'll work well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my forms set up, and then we'll start transferring the curd into the forms. So I have a base of a bamboo drying mat, and then also this plastic piece as well with holes in it. I'm going to set the Brie form on top of that, and I'm just going to set that in here. Do that again. Another one. And then we have the larger one. Right now I don't need anything under that because the bottom of this is closed. But when I do flip it, I will take another one of these mats, put it like this, and we'll go like that. But I'll show you that when we get to that step. Right now what I want to do, scoop the curds into each one of these forms and then let it start draining. What we have to do is flip them all within about a half an hour. So I'd say about 20 minutes in, I'll come out, flip them all again. And about every 20 minutes for 2 to 3 hours, we want to do that. And then I'll let them sit overnight. Right now it's the evening time. I'll do this for a couple hours and then I'll let them sit the rest of the night, overnight. And then tomorrow we'll flip them some more, probably till about lunchtime or so. This may take 14 to 20 hours. You want to do it until the whey slows down in draining. And then at that point we salt. But if you salt too early, the salt's just going to wash away. So we want to let the whey drain, and then we'll do the continuous flipping. Then we'll go from there. Now, as I do this, I'm going to scoop off about a half inch or so off the top. As I'm doing this, I just don't want to take a big spoonful and slam it in there. Use your stir and kind of skim off by about a half inch. And we want to just do it in a rotating pattern. I want to have them all about the same fullness. As you can see, these curds are great. Kind of looks like tofu. So put one in there. I'll put 2 in the big one, so it's about twice as big as the others. Start back at the first one. Okay, I've transferred all of the curd. As you can see, the 8-inch diameter and then the 2 4-inch diameters, they're about equal. The big one's a little bit fuller, but that's okay. We're gonna come back out here in a little while, about a half an hour, and flip these. Okay, we've let the cheese drain for about 20 minutes or so. Now I'm gonna attempt the first flip. Remember, these aren't pressed or anything. You want to put something over top of it. I'll show you how I'm going to do it, and then you want to quickly flip it over. I just had these jugs sitting on top because my small forms were starting to raise a little bit, and some of the curd was starting to come out the bottom. But I was able to prevent that with the jugs. So the big one, this first flip will not be a problem because the bottom of it is sealed, so I can pick it right up. This should be fun. My goal here is to flip this over quickly, like that. Oh boy. So as you can see, a little bit came out the side. We'll just have to work with it. Now we'll flip these smaller ones. Now remember, the bottom of these, if you're using this kind of form, are open. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece of plastic on top. I'm going to recreate the bottom. The plastic on top. And then put this bamboo on top of that and flip. All right, lost a little bit of curd out the bottom of this one. That's okay. So we're just gonna have to deal with that. Now we have one more to flip. Yes, this is a little messy. For this last one, we'll just do the same thing as that second one. I have a plastic on top. I'm just going to flip it quick. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to rinse these screens off. I'm going to put the gallon of milk on top of these as well, so I don't want this to move. And I'll probably flip these in 15 minutes because I can see the surface pour a little bit. I think it's okay, but is there another one? I think it's okay, but I just don't want it to keep on ripping every time I flip these. And I don't want these small ones to lift up. So I'm going to put some milk jugs with water on them. We've flipped it once already, now we're going to flip it for a second time. I waited about another 20 minutes. We're gonna flip it. Each time it should get a little bit easier because it is drying a little bit each time and draining. So we're going to flip the small one first. We have the plastic on top of this. Now I'm putting a little mat on top of that as a base, making sure it's lined up, and then quickly flipping it over. Wonderful. Stayed together better as well on that surface. And I'll take a picture of that. Okay, we flip the cheese over a course of about 20 hours, about once every 2 to 3 hours, and then let it drain overnight. Now we're salting. I'm going to use a half a teaspoon on the top of each one of these small ones, and a whole teaspoon of salt on the big one. And once you sprinkle it on, just move it around with your hand a little bit, kind of spread it out. And then in about an hour or so, we'll flip it over and we'll repeat that process. So this is day 6 from the make day. After salting, I let it air dry for about 2 days, and then I put it into my aging space. And as you can see, it is developing a really nice bloomy rind. So I'm flipping these about twice a day. You'll see they'll start sticking to the mat or whatever you're using, because that mold, the white mold that we want, is growing. So we want to flip it twice a day. If you wait too long and try to flip it, it's going to tear the outside. We certainly don't want that. So yeah, I'll let this go about another 5 days until this outside mold has a really good thick coating, and then I will wrap it and put it into my regular refrigerator for the final aging. But these Bries are doing wonderful right now. Okay, I have been aging the Brie in the aging space for about 5 days. It's been 8 days since the make day. So what I did, as you saw in the video, made the cheese. I let it drain over a couple days, and then we salted, and then I removed it from the forms, let it air dry for a couple days, and then I put it in the aging space. As you can see, we have beautiful white mold created by the Penicillium Candidum all over the outside of the Brie. It feels kind of cottony to a degree. These are exactly the way these should look. These are absolutely perfect. Now, as far as aging, a couple different things you can do. The longer you age it, the more ripe it's going to be, the more gooey it'll be over time. What I'm going to do with these is I'm going to wrap these in this paper that I use for blue cheeses. You can get this via the link in the description of this video. This is a wax paper lined foil. It'll hold in the moisture, and you can age this just for the rest of its time just in the regular refrigerator. The reason you're able to do that is because in a regular refrigerator you would normally dry out a cheese. This will hold in the moisture, and the regular refrigerator reduced temperature down to about 40 degrees, something like that, will actually slow the mold production down on this. Or you can leave it in your aging space, 52 to 55 degrees at the humidity between about 94%. You're going to get a little bit different ripening. If you just leave it in the aging space, it will continue to age rapidly, and the enzymes are working on the milk within the cheese, or in the curd within the cheese, and it'll it'll ripen it faster along the edges, and you'll have, when you cut it open, you'll have a more defined line between the ripe cheese and the center that's going to be a little bit firmer. There will be a pretty distinct line. If I put it in the regular refrigerator, it'll slow down the ripening process, and I'll get a more consistent ripening throughout the cheese. Just really what your preference is. It doesn't really matter. Both methods will work, but I'm going to wrap this and put it in the fridge, and that's it. We'll be able to take this out I'll probably take these out and cut them in about 4 weeks. So thanks for watching the first video of the Bloomy Rind series. Hope your cheese is looking like this, and keep an eye out for the next video on Camembert. Thank you.